Good morning, everyone. Happy March 8th. Hard to believe, but time is flying by and it's getting warmer and warmer, and we're happy to be with you here this morning. Lee Roberts with Bergen KDV, Director of Sales and Owner. And we're going to look forward to having some exciting content to really get down to not only showing you some examples like many webinars do today of content and shots and those types of things, but we're really excited to actually dive in the application and show you what's available, and we'll talk about what's here today and what's in the future. But I want to do a special welcome right off the bat to all of the clients that are joining us from People, etc., as well as Pay Stubs. Welcome to all of you. We're very excited to have you, and we're excited to showcase a few Bergen KDV names that you may be dealing with in myself and Micah. So as we roll forward here, I want to set this up and allow our panelists to introduce themselves. As I mentioned, my name is Lee Roberts. My current role is Director of Sales, but I'm really an HCM practitioner by trade. I've set up over 300 companies on payroll, timekeeping, and HR technology. The tools today, while not perfect, are far more easy than they were back then, and we'll share a few war stories about that. But the main talent joining me is Micah Zernhelt and David Hanna. Micah, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience today and talk about a little bit of your background.
Sounds great. Thanks, Lee. My name is Micah Zernhelt. I am the HCM Consulting Manager here at Bergen KDV. I've been with this firm for about 3 years now, actually, but I've spent my entire career really in HR, benefits, and payroll outsourcing services. Before being here, I spent about 15 years with a large national insurance broker where I led their outsourcing division, providing outsourced HR, benefits, and payroll administration to clients all across the spectrum. Here with Bergen, I spend my days working with clients, helping them figure out how to take better advantage of this technology, how to implement new features as they come out, and just how to generally improve their process. So I'm glad to be here to talk about technology and how it's grown. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, a lot of experience, and he uses the tools, as you will see when he's clicking around here. So David, talk a little bit about your background, please.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lee. And quick shout out to all the people on there that have seen me before. I'm sitting here in Rapid City, South Dakota. And as Lee said, my name is David Hanna. I am the person that was crazy enough to start Pay Stubs over 14 years ago. And on December 31st, we figured out a way to work directly with Bergen KDV, and we merged forces together. Prior to that, I was a CPA for 10 years, and then went through 14 years in the HCM or human capital management industry to get to this point. And one of the reasons we're here today, me, and a lot of our clients that have been with us all those years, is because, as you're going to see here in a few minutes, the HCM industry has changed greatly. There were 11 of us at Pay Stubs, and we realized the deeper this software got and the more complicated it became with the new features, we needed a little more horsepower to do it well into the future. And then the other nicest part that you're going to see in a bit are the other opportunities for those people that we had served for so long to use even more things that can integrate deeper into the system. But very happy to be here, and thanks for the chance, Lee, and I look forward to hearing everybody's good comments and questions coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be monitoring those comments and questions. So if there is a specific area, as Bethany mentioned, you want us to hit on, throw that in the chat. But without further ado, Micah, let's roll forward. And you've all seen the invite, so I don't need to read through all the bullet points, but we're very big in our culture at Bergen KDV of teaching and exposing folks to maybe what some companies a little bit larger than us are doing, what's coming down the pipe, how it's going to affect us, and all of those types of things. But in order to do that, I think it's really important to look at kind of where we've been and really what the definition of HCM technology is today. And in order to do that, I asked Micah to put together a visual as we roll forward here to the next screen that really talks about, what is the macro level goal of an HCM platform, and it really is changed. A lot of us, especially that are used to, living in this payroll and timekeeping world, and the goal was to get out a gross to net paycheck. has totally shifted as employment and recruitment of people has gotten harder, as retention of people has gotten harder, into, how do we use technology to create meaningful and connected work experiences for all people? And as we look forward, Micah and I spend a lot of time monitoring what's really going on. And we talked a little bit about this on a similar webinar a few months ago, but the data really is showing us that we are at an inflection point. And you can look through these just being a couple of the stats that are out there. But technology matters to folks today. It matters in your personal life. It matters now even more in the business life. And we have to really understand what that means from an outcomes perspective. And as you look at a business and as you look at how organizations have typically used technology in their business, a lot of people don't look at this visually and actually think about how many different things and applications and reports and files and pieces of paper and all of this goes into actually managing our human capital. And the way we like to think about it as we look forward in the next slide is this is a software hairball. And the way I think about it is if I ask an employee during orientation and I start going through that onboarding process, how many spots do I need to ask them to go? How many separate logins and passwords? Just what chaos are we asking them to actually learn? And if we take a critical look at ourselves, even Bergen KDV, we're not perfect in this regard. And it's everyone wants to get to that one system, but it's very hard. And the data shows that most businesses we go into today, still in 2022, have between 5 and 7 separate applications that people are accessing, and we're going to show you a few ideas for different ways to maybe do something about that. So it's important to understand where we've been. We've been in separate systems, a lot of manual still today. So if you're there, don't feel bad. By no means has anyone figured this out. And a lot of siloed information that just takes a lot of effort to go ahead and be able to do what we do on a daily basis. So before we transition to kind of the next leg of the journey, David, you've been in this business for a long time. What else might you add?
In the bullet point there, the disparate systems and multiple cost centers, with the accounting background that is so deeply ingrained to me since I was a little kid, actually. Aggregating labor costs and comparing those labor costs to revenue figures or to other various metrics. Those disparate systems, and coming up in the near future and over the next few years, you're going to see more and more of that data being glued together through automated programming interfaces, as well as artificial intelligence, as well as some systems adding on more to what they're capable of doing. And those key operating metrics that involve labor costs, they're going to involve a lot more as well. And that's something we'll touch on again here a little bit later, thinking of the FAA or the FAST group with Bergen KDV that can do some really fun stuff in helping to aggregate that data. And I don't know, but for me, pulling together data to make it actionable, I get kind of excited about, and there'll be more to come on that in the next few minutes.
Yeah, no doubt. And Micah knows this all too well about me. I'm a big visual person. So another way to look at a recent 50 employee company example, this is one that we were in. When you talk about pulling stuff together, very, very, very hard when your tech stack looks like the picture below. And while you can look at the costs of those, it's just not the modern way to do it. And most organizations are very much about trying to tackle that. So as we continue on with just a couple more things about the look back, I ask people all the time when I give this talk, whether I'm teaching a chamber or a specific HR class, the relevance of this date. And a lot of people find it very, very hard to believe the relevance of this date. But as Micah goes to the next slide, this really is when the modern HCM system was born, and that is the signing of the Affordable Care Act. It really was the first time that it became incredibly hard, as you go back to that visual that we looked at in the beginning and talked about creating the meaningful work experiences. It really was the first time that it was no longer a nice to have. You really needed it to be able to report across all of these different functional areas just to do the compliance game. And that changed the foundation of technology. That was one thing that was occurring. The second thing that was occurring as we look at some more data from surveys and the like as we roll forward is what people care about has also changed. Maybe not change, but maybe just be more intentional, or it's been more of a hyper focus. The safety, the understanding the expectations, the ability to see a career path, knowing that they're valued, making sure that the enterprise is not only looking out for the enterprise, but looking out for the employee's personal self and their family. Micah, you've been involved in thousands of conversations over the last 24 months. What did we leave off of this slide?
Yeah, I agree. I think especially, as we sort of start to come back out of, the depths of COVID changes, that idea about feeling heard and feeling safe and understanding expectations has really crystallized for a lot of employees. I think that, we talk a lot about, getting back to normal, but there is no normal, because I think there's been a real shift in the way that employees look at their relationship with employers. And technology plays a big part in that, in terms of knowing what's going on, about understanding what they're receiving in terms of benefits, in terms of pay, in terms of, communication tools. I think there's just a lot of back and forth that, 2 years ago was a very different environment.
Yeah, for sure. So as we move forward, that's enough on the look back and the why, but the punchline is software companies changed during that period and really came around to understanding the value of having all of these things together. And if there's one word that I want you to think about as you think about where technology is going, is it is totally around the word proactive. And when we look at applications, we as users have generally had to ask the application a question via typing or clicking on a bunch of buttons, and then it would return that result. And when we look at where the investment is going into the application, there's kind of 4 functional areas that are going to flip that into more of a proactive realm. And these are just some of the highlights over the last 12 months. Quickly, as we move forward to the next slide, because I want to get to the good stuff, and we let the slide click through these, new user interface experiences, millions of employees on the product, thousands of companies on the product, a lot more modules, a ton of investment. You just look at the pure dollars with fintech and private equity coming into this space more than ever. That's happened, and then a focus, sense of security. But these are all of the things that are really going on in the space, and it's now important to talk about where we're at now with things that have changed just over the recent months. And what's so fun for Micah and I when we give these presentations is 2 years ago when we talked about these things, people thought we were crazy. They didn't think they were going to be implemented. Micah and I even didn't think half of the things would be implemented. And voila, here we are today. They're kind of mainstays. So Micah, take us through where we're at today and what some of the things are available now, because I'm guessing while we try to communicate a lot of this stuff, many of our users don't even know these are available.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the pace of technology has been really, dramatic, and the growth and development speed, it's hard for folks to keep up with. You see those release notes come out and something sounds really exciting, but sometimes it's hard to keep your arms around. And I think this idea of, a unified solution for analytics, going back to what you talked about, Lee, with the ACA, having just kind of come out of that season, a lot of the clients really understand that ability to tie payroll data and timekeeping data and benefit data all together is really key. And so having a single system that provides those analytics is a huge benefit. And where we've seen that growth over the past 24 months, to David's point, is in this growth in AI analytics, in figuring out what you want in advance, being proactive, and bringing those things forward. I think the analytics inside the system and the ability to not just run reports on demand, but also to be able to do things like, pivot tables and guided analytics, so that people who aren't comfortable writing reports have those tools. And that's something we can definitely show when we jump over to the system live as well. Another real key feature over the past, 12 months or so has been this idea of personalized workspaces and getting people to the places that they need to be. I think, historically, systems have been harder to navigate and have really relied on the user to understand what to do and where to go. And this idea of being proactive and pushing the right information to the right people has led to the development of these spaces where if I'm coming in as a recruiter, everything I need to do that work is laying right in front of me. The job rec is there, the applications are there, all of my navigation tools are in one place, so I don't have to bounce around. And that's been a huge shift in terms of the mindset from a technology standpoint. The other thing that we've seen has been around scheduling. I think especially with people leaving work and coming back to work and the growth of the gig economy and part-time employees, the ability to manage where employees are and where you need them to be able to, set up a workforce need profile essentially that says, I need this many people in this job, and then to pull in employee availability, employee schedule preferences, employee skills, whatever it may be, and blend that into an automated scheduling tool that uses its intelligence as opposed to someone having to sit down with a spreadsheet and piece together and fill the slots, has been an explosive growth as we see people try to fill these slots. And then, there we go. Really the last piece I want to touch on in terms of where we are today is just this idea of industry expertise and operational best practices. Again, I think if the past 2 years have shown a lot of businesses anything, it's that you have to be flexible and you have to look for those best practices. Doing things the way that you have done on paper and a pile of spreadsheets, worked well enough when everyone was sitting all together. But as we look towards a much more virtual environment, as you start to recruit people from across the country, the ability to absorb best practices from across your industry and to have resources like Bergen KDV that has depth in specific industries to provide those has been a big game changer for a lot of businesses. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Lee? Otherwise, I'd love to show a few, live pieces in the system, because I think to your point, even clients who currently use the platform maybe haven't seen some of these because they may not have, really had the opportunity to dive deep on their own, instance yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's important. So yeah, let's pull it up and let's show them. And while you're doing that, yeah, these are things that are available. And like I said, 2 years ago, they were not. 6 months ago, some of these were not available. So it's happening very, very quickly as far as the pace of change goes. And it's very, very exciting for the opportunity that are there. When you look just at the macro level, a lot more businesses are getting on what you might call an HCM platform. And when you look at the 13, 14, 15, each potential company is going to have different modules depending on how the software is architected. Only about 33% of those are being used. So not too different than any software deployment, but there's a lot of stuff that's not being used. And I'm going to talk about here in a little bit about what your culture should be and what I would encourage your mindset to be in order to align to that and in order to align to that employee need. But this is an actual look in the application. Most webinars, unless it's a specific demo webinar, don't get into this, and we wanted to be a little bit different. So yeah, Michael, let's show them what this actually looks like instead of a couple screenshots.
Yeah, thanks. So I think that idea of analytics, I'm sort of like David in that I love to pull the data together. I love a good report. I love a good, Excel spreadsheet. And I think, historically what we've talked about in the system, in systems in general, is, how do you push information to employees? We talked about, report automation. And, then the next phase after the report automation was things like the dashboards, which I love because it puts information right in front of managers without them having to go looking for it. But the next step of that proactive step is, how do you guide them to get the information that they want? How do you help them find that? And one example in the system is the guided analytics tools. So for example, on the timekeeping side, if we look at the calculated time summary report, for example, there's a tool that lets you, pick out what you want. So you can use the guided analytics, and the system will walk you through a series of questions that says, what are you looking for? How do my overtime hours compare with regular work by cost center? Let's look at that. And then it's going to ask you some specific questions about your instance, like making sure that I know, what my overtime counter is, what my regular counter is. And when I fill those in, we'll go for a whole month here. Let's see. And click Assist Me. I'm putting a cost center. I want to be by department. There we go. And then the system will generate information for you. It will generate reports. It will generate charts. It will provide you with details that you don't have to understand how to build a pivot table. You don't have to understand how to build a chart, but you can, have your managers guided to this information with very little training and skill set on their part, which is huge, because having them have access to this information, again, going back to this ideal of a single database system where you can pull payroll, you can pull time all together is huge. And for users that are, maybe more tech savvy, maybe on your HR benefits team, the ability to build out, those pivot tables and those summary reports on their own is something that has, really taken off in the past 6 or 8 months, so that you can take your life insurance and build reporting. You can build charts around that. If you're comfortable using, Excel, you're going to recognize these interfaces and be able to adopt them really quickly. So the analytics piece, I think, is a huge part of where we are now, and also a part of really when we talk more about what's coming in the future. I think the analytics and the data analysis is a major component of that.
Yeah, it's a long ways from the days of going to class for 2 weeks and reading a 10,000 page user guide as far as how to figure things out, isn't it?
Exactly. I remember I implemented a software system from a company that shall not be named that has 3 letters in the name. And they sent me away to literally a week of classroom training, just how to use the report writer. And that seemed great at the time, but now that would be mind-blowing if we told a client that it's going to take a solid week of 6-hour days for you to figure out how to write a report. That's just not where we are anymore.
Yeah, and if the way that I would think about this is, if you are still doing a lot of your management reporting out of Excel, and you're having to merge reports together and do pivot tables outside of the system and all of those things. I mean, Mike is just trying to give you a little bit of a taste here, but a multi-dimensional view and the ability to segment and slice and dice your workforce management or your HR data should be done inside of the application using the modeling tools that Micah was shown. So if you're not doing that today, we'll invite you to have a conversation at the end of the program.
Yeah, absolutely. The other piece about where we are, and in terms of going back to that idea of having employees feel valued and having them know expectations, there's a huge need for training. We see that here internally. I think every business struggles with that. How do you train a new hire? How do you deliver training to them? Again, especially in this environment where you may not all be in the same place. And so the growth of integrated learning tools is a huge piece. Again, the platform has always had the ability to track certifications and track education and credentials, and we've had a lot of clients be really successful with that. But the integration of legitimate LMS, learning management delivery tools, is a huge piece. So in this example, I'm logged in. I can see, exactly what trainings are assigned to people, but I can use these assign buttons to jump directly over to my LMS and administer all of that content, administer, web-based training. I can manage live training registration. I can manage virtual training registration. I can track how much time employees are spending engaging with the training, as well as how they're scoring on quizzes after the fact. So that's really valuable, now both the employer to make sure that people are trained and understand their jobs, but it goes a long way to making people feel valued and appreciated. Because, I mean, honestly, we've all had those jobs where you just kind of get dumped in the deep end and, it's sink or swim. And those are not the jobs most people enjoy and recommend that others come to. Those where people feel equipped to do their job and have access to tools to explain how their job should happen, that goes a long way towards employee satisfaction. So the learning and training piece is a huge component of modern human capital systems. And then the last piece I just want to touch on in terms of the live demo, since we talked a little bit about scheduling, is again, that idea of needing to tie workforce needs to employee needs. And so the ability to build out templates in the scheduler where you can set rules that indicate how many people you need to do each job each day. And then you can have the system look at employee skills, look at employee availability that they have put in, look at employee scheduled time off, and monitor that and assign that automatically. And then also giving you as the manager the ease of ability to, whoops, wrong button, to manipulate that and to modify that through simple drag and drop interfaces, as opposed to having to, understand what all of the buttons do. Again, if I need to extend this person's shift, I want to just be able to extend their shift, maybe not to 18 hours. That seems a little unfair. But wanting to be able to provide easy tools to management as well as tools to employees. And also just, again, from an analytics standpoint, this idea of show me what I've said I need in the red in terms of coverage and what I've got for coverage in the gray. And so I can know immediately, very visually where my gaps are and where I need to open up more shifts or where I need to hire. So a lot of great tools already exist inside the platform for folks that need to take advantage of them. And I think that the next few slides where we start to talk about things that are coming are even more exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Again, just asked Micah to get in and show us just a few examples of what the application looks like, or what a modernized HCM application would look like. Far greater time should be spent on that and could be spent on that. But as Micah was going through that, I was just jotting down a couple of things. And, at the macro level, we're all on this digital roadmap or this digital transformation journey within our businesses in some way, shape, or form. And certainly the HR technology and the way that's going to navigate is going to be kind of a macro theme. We've taken a big leap if we look back. I guess I'll be the look back guy on this call in giving more self-service capabilities to the employee and giving more self-service capabilities to the manager. I mean, I remember 10 years ago, it was very rare for managers even to be approving time off in many cases. In a lot of the small to medium-sized businesses, that was something that, or timesheets, or schedule changes, or those types of things. And we've really made big leaps in doing that and allowing people at the point of decision, Micah and I working the same job, I not being able to attend tomorrow, Micah being skilled and able to do it, us to be able to do a simple shift swap. And that not needing to go to a manager for approval because we both have the skills and can do the job. You're going to see that trend continue to push. And, as far as looking into the future goes, I mean, this is super, super radical as well. But in 2 years, I'm confident you're going to see it. Imagine employees that are approving timesheets, not only approving their timesheet, but actually quasi-processing their paycheck themselves and being able to see it gross to net before they actually submit it and roll it up to a manager level. Those are all things that are being worked on right now as we look to get people who are in the know and at the decision point to have that. So those are some of the trends driving us. Micah talked about some of the examples of data being put into the system. That's another just important point. So it used to be, even in the one database, you would have just HR and time data is what that system would accept. And when David talked about, putting on his finance hat or just analyzing the business hat, nothing from the operational side was ever brought in. And the ability to bring in things like sales figures, to do revenue per FTE or other types of calculations, the ability for, if you're a call center, to bring in the number of calls per hour and help that predict what your scheduling requirements might be. Or if you're healthcare, the ability to put in census data by floor and having that predict. If you're in retail, the ability to have the number of people in your store in certain minute increments and have that, again, build that model without you having to click a button. Those are some of the types of things that we think about with regards to proactive, and every one of those functional buckets that were on that little upside down moon are having those types of things being brought in. And it's exciting because it's going to help us be able to do our jobs easier. It's also going to require us to think about that as a picture of that overall digital transformation that we're all going to go through. So those things are here now. They are in the application. They're live. So if you want to have further conversations about any of those, if you're seeing a win there, we'd be happy to do that. But now let's really dive in the latter part of our session here. Amazing. We could have practiced that 100 times and never hit that right on the 50% mark, but good job, Micah. So let's dive in now to those 4 major themes. And let's talk about what that means to our end users as far as how we're thinking about that. So as you roll forward to the the personal side of this, again, enhancing the platform to deliver a personal experience that's going to delight. We humans want everything tailored for us now. It didn't used to be that way as much back in the day. And what you want to imagine is imagine yourself literally waking up and having the HCM, the employee self-service capabilities, connected. We live in a connected world. You've got smart refrigerators, smart showers, smart everything. Imagine it connecting to your Outlook email calendar and telling you things like, it looks like it's going to take you X amount of time to get to the office today. That is very real as far as that proactive personalization. That's what it might look like. As we look forward on the intelligence side, Micah, we talked engaging culture and that purpose-driven, that purpose-driven culture that's rewarding. How does technology play into that? What might that look like?
Yeah, I think a lot of that definitely falls into the analytics arena. Where we're seeing it going are things like, AI-driven flight risk. You've already got all this data in the system. You've got your turnover data in the system. You've got reasons. What if the system could look at, when people leave, what are the trends it sees based on their work schedule or their overtime or their bonus payments or their performance reviews, time off requests? All of those things exist in the system. If it could pull it together and give you a flight risk tool, I think that's a huge one. And I think that's really in the not too distant future. I think that's even on the flight plan for the next, 18 months or so. Other things like, sentiment analysis, where we start to look at, if you're doing performance reviews or employee surveys or things where employees are keying free-form responses into the system, using the AI technology to actually pull out, what does it really say? Without having to read all of the comments one by one, how do you glean the key elements out of that and use the technology to your advantage? So I'm really excited about, both of those pieces.
Awesome. So as we roll forward to this next one, David and I were having a conversation yesterday or the day before, and the thing that we think about is, how many times has someone asked us, what is the best practice to do my open enrollment, or what is the best way to do my onboarding as this particular type of company? And if you go back to the number of employees that are hitting the technology, and you go back to the number of companies that are on it, and now we layer in this ability to look across those big themes with the artificial intelligence and the machine learning, we've gotten paid, or actually I should say, David, you'd probably agree with me on this, we've given away a lot of free advice over our careers on how to do those best practices. And really what it's going to come down to is, instead of us offering our professional opinions and really starting from a blank canvas, how should I do my open enrollment in a benefits admin module like exists within KPay? the system is now going to start looking at things like this particular organization is a manufacturer. It has this many employees. You have 7 plans versus 4 plans. And it's going to formulate a best practice checklist based on things it knows: accuracy of benefit enrollment that's been completed, speed of time that has been completed, least amount of errors, whatever those attributes are that keep building into that intelligence. The system, just like those self-guiding reporting tools, is going to do that for other areas of the application. So you may be presented with a best practices way of doing your open enrollment, and that's a very, very, very different experience. So when we talk about that prediction and that proactive word, I keep using it far too much. That's another way that that's going to show up, is instead of us needing to start and kind of build this HCM system from a blank sheet of paper, which those of you that have went through implementations know how much thought and change and everything needs to go into that. Think about the system doing 40, 50, 60, 70% of that work in there. So Micah, there was a question that was put in that I just would like you to comment on as you get to the next slide with regards to connected. Is there's some newcomers to the space, the HR space, that being that are just getting into their career, and obviously they're seeing everything continuing to be automated, right? A lot of the stuff that that people used to do is continuing to be automated. So you know, the commentary is, you know, you can't automate employee empathy, you can't automate dealing with people, you can't automate a lot of that stuff. But the question is actually a good one. You know, did I invest into a obsolete career path? So, you know, how are HR leaders using this, or how are the HR generalists and folks at the mid-level using technology to add value to the enterprise? I think it's an important question.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I think if you spend time hanging out with HR people, you hear a lot of dialogue about how do you get a seat at the table? How do you be more strategic? And these tools, I think, really play into that, because, you know, to David's point and your point, like, business leadership makes decisions based on numbers. And historically, you know, I've spent my whole career in HR, and I think we will all admit that people historically are not always number people, because they are empathetic. They are interested in what's best for the employees, and that's a valuable skill set. But then when it comes to, you know, how do you demonstrate that value? How do you show the ROI on your HR department? That's something HR folks are asked for all the time. How do you justify that spend? And so being able to use technology to say, look at how I've reduced flight risks across the company. Look at how turnover has changed. Look at how benefit enrollment has, you know, changed in terms of our spend. You know, having the information available to HR folks is powerful to them, because I always talk to HR folks about, we want to push the manager self-service, we want to push the employee self-service, because they're too valuable to do data entry. They didn't get hired to do data entry or to run reports. They are there to be empathetic, to have a people strategy for the business. And, you know, how do we use the tool to let them do those things, as opposed to spending their day keying in benefit enrollments or running reports for managers that they could very easily run themselves.
Awesome, thank you, thank you, thank you. So yeah, let's continue on that third theme, that connected.
Yeah, so I think with connections, where we see it going is just this idea of other ways to use the tool. I mean, you talked a little bit about it being personalized, but the growth of AI chat so that employees can, you know, not have to log in or not know where to go. We actually saw this now. There's an integration between the platform and Microsoft Teams, where you can type in, what's my PTO balance, into a Teams chat, and a bot will, you know, pull your balance back to you. And so the ability to do more of that, to tie it to schedules, to tie it to other things, is a really exciting piece of growth. And I think, you know, similarly, just this idea of support, it's something that's near and dear to us. You know, how do we provide better support? How do you, as HR people or business owners, provide the support to your employees so that they can utilize the platform? You know, how does that communication work, and what tools can we provide to facilitate that?
Yeah, and I want to dive into that for a second. So when we talk about employee engagement and we talk, you know, people accessing the system, it's no longer an 8 to 5 thing. It's happening very, very quickly. And when we talk about employee satisfaction, that would be another comment to that question earlier about, how does the HR professional, us, how do we align to this technology? Is imagine I'm sitting down on one of my first days, and maybe I've just gotten through orientation, but there's some follow-up stuff that needs to happen, and you literally being alerted that Lee Roberts is looking at the benefits package, and your ability to instantly send David Hanna a chat and say, hey, David, I see you're checking this out. Let me know if there's anything that I can help you with. And instead of that being a reactive question, being more of a proactive question. And your ability to use the chat function within the application, just like you're seeing in Teams, heck, it might be Teams embedded in it. There's a lot of different ways that these are going to be handled depending on the platform you're on, but it's that instantaneous response and how you can get to that employee quicker and more proactively to delight them is something that's going to be there versus an email that's sent and then the employee goes off to the next meeting and then another thing happens that they have to deal with. And now they're looking at this, 2 or 3 days later when all they want to do, anyone that's joined a new role, you just want to get that stuff done. Not that it's not important, it's very important, but you just want to get that stuff done so you can actually go focus on your real job. And I think this is going to give us a heck of an opportunity to do that better. So as we roll forward, I want to talk a little bit about that self-service function that existed when we first started offering employees pay stubs online and W-2s online, and we had physical time clock devices for those folks that weren't in a technology rich environment, and they would go swipe a badge, use a fingerprint as well. David, I know that that you deployed a lot of these back in your time. And just David, talk a little bit about just where the hardware side of this is going and how it's bringing self-service to kind of more of that front lines.
Yeah, no, in 2005, I was part of a hotel group, big hotel group, and we had deployed the Stromberg time and attendance system that is no longer to be found. But that was with Ethernet cabled time clocks, biometrics that were okay, and all through our own server that we had to deploy. We have 350 employees in that group, and we spent $18,000 alone on our own SQL server just to manage those time clocks. And the hardware alone, I think, was about another $18,000 across all the facilities. So you take that in 2005, fast forward 16, 17 years, and here we are with plug and play time clocks that aren't just clock in and out, but you can request time off. You can see your past pay statement, which that's debatable as to whether or not you want that deployed at the clock if there's people online standing behind them, but that capability is there. And plus all kinds of other self-service tools right at the clock and the kiosk. So depending on the industry you're in, if you have people that don't have smartphones on them or they can't have them with them, those particular time clocks can take the place of a computer as a kiosk and do a whole lot more. Facial recognition is coming down the line, and the hardware devices, even though a lot of the clients use the web clock, the hardware devices can make a very compelling case even for some clients that have been web clock only oriented on the timekeeping system.
Yeah, for sure. Smaller, smarter, more powerful. Yeah, and David said it well. It's anything that you can give permission to do from a computer or a mobile device. For those folks that don't have those, can't have them, you're going to have the ability to deploy that down. Every and all those are very dangerous words, but a lot of the functionality is there today, and you will continue to see more and more of that stuff being opened up. Time off requests is an example, shift swaps is an example, and other of those types of things. So not the fanciest thing to necessarily talk about, but just like you say, in a short period of time, how much has changed and how much will change going forward has just been incredible. So we want to continue just exposing you here over the next few minutes to other things. Micah, I think about this. I mean, an engagement survey used to be, that was a quarterly rock, a quarterly initiative. You did it once a year. I mean, by the time it was done, it took, semi-truck worth of effort to put it together and figure out what the heck it said and all of those types of things. So, I mean, talk about the ability to do it, and then what frequency are companies doing this at now? Just like, how is it switching?
Yeah, I think this is really sort of an inflection point between where we are and where we're going, because the ability to do engagement surveys inside the platform is there now. Historically, again, people had to go out and do it themselves to compile the answers or use a tool like SurveyMonkey, but the ability to do it inside where employees are already going to punch in and out or to do other things is a huge benefit. Where we're going with it is that idea of frequency, Lee, because I think the more you can survey people, the better the results are going to get. Can you do it quarterly? Can you go as far as, our partners at UKG actually do a weekly pulse of how employees feel about their manager? It's a 2-question survey, but they send it out every week to get a pulse on how employees feel like with their direct supervisor. So you can really gather some great information when it's easy for employees to do, where you're reducing that friction by keeping it in that single database. So I think the expansion of the survey tools, and we talked about the future state of that analytics to analyze the comments, is going to be a great add.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about when we talk about companies, we put on a couple of these presentations at a fairly frequent basis about just what to think about when you're going in to implement a new module, or what to think about when you're coming off of a legacy application and you want to implement a workforce management system. But to those HR leaders, what I would tell you is this: however you're getting the feedback, and even if you don't have an engagement survey type setup, just keep track of the questions that are coming to you inbound, because I can promise you that if one employee or one manager asks a question, they're requesting a report, or they're wondering about this, if you can build that into your culture as a people first HR department of answering that question, if one person asks it, probably everyone in that role, maybe multiple people within the company, are going to want that answer. And your ability to put it into the software and make it available and showcase that, it's going to be an engagement trigger big time that's going to drive that up. And that is not an event, that is an always type of thing. So if there's just any hack or any tidbit I can give you, it's our ability as humans. This is not the technology that's going to do that. It's our ability as humans to align and give people what they're asking for without them having to necessarily ask us, is going to be big. And just another example, as Micah rolls forward to the next slide, about what might this look like from a personalized standpoint. We talked about schedules being integrated, knowing that I'm going to the gym, might want to leave now. Those are just all sort of those Echo, Google type, convenience things from a personal level that are going to be put into the application. So just hopefully we're drilling home just this change and this theme. But Micah, the other thing I would comment on just regarding the HR profession is every business that we go to, I mean, there are so many things that could be done, should be done, and people feel overwhelmed because a lot of these administrative tasks are out there. Whether or not there's as many people going into the profession or not, debatable. We can look at certain pocket case stats and talk about that, but there's just a lot of things that are being done that are administrative still, and this is one of them. This is a really, really big one. So how's the technology handling this and making people's jobs easier?
Yeah, bill audits, especially specifically like benefit carrier bill audits, is a huge piece. I think people don't really think about how much money can flow out the door if you aren't on top of your benefit carrier bills, because a lot of those, if you miss terminating someone on medical or enrolling them in the new plan, a lot of those carriers will go back 60 to 90 days on corrections. So you really have to stay current. In my pre-Bergen KDV life, this was actually a key service that we offered, was the ability to reconcile carrier bills against enrollment systems. But it was hugely manual. We had a staff of 20 people that basically took the bill, took a report, and matched it up and then sent back discrepancies. And so the growth in technology that we've seen is that there are now tools available where you can essentially upload a PDF of your invoice, it talks to the enrollment engine on the platform, and spits out your discrepancies. So again, it takes that administrative work off of the HR person and lets them focus on the more strategic pieces, because they don't need doing that line by line. They need the results. The results are important. They can't stop the process, but they can stop the tedium of it.
Awesome. And as you go to the next slide, you went in and dove into something that I've been waiting for a long time. Are you really telling me that we are going to have a true learning management? True learning management is now going into mainstream HCM systems. Is that really what you're saying?
It really is, because I think for the longest time, LMS was sort of this last holdout in HR. You had these vendors, Cornerstone and others that were these huge systems, tens of thousands of dollars to implement. And they were great, they are great, but they were always separate from the rest of the HR world. And you could build integrations, but that just builds into that hairball that you talked about, Lee, at the beginning. So the ability to have a truly integrated LMS that seamlessly ties into the rest of your HR. So again, employees only have to go one place, managers only have to go one place. It builds consistency, it helps with training, but it still gives you those tools that have always lived somewhere else. So yeah, this is a huge piece that's going to come over the next 12 months. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's developing teams outside of just us talking to organizations about HR functionality. That is the #1 consulting thing that our business advisory group is probably focused on right now, is just how do you develop high functioning teams? And one way to do that, we talked about, you need to understand so you can retain, you need to be delightful and flashy so you can attract, but growing that team set or growing that employee force and skill set of your team members in quality and quantity is probably going to be the most hyper-focused thing that's going to happen in the HR world, in my opinion, in the small to medium-sized business sector over the next 5 years. So think about those of you that are sports fans, the programs in whatever sport you're in, that they don't get the 5-star or the 4-star players. They get the 2s and the 3s with the 4 and 5-star hearts, and they grow them to be those 4s and 5s. And the way that you do that, or the way that we're thinking about that, and really the way that software is thinking about that, is understanding and supporting people in a meaningful way. And hopefully we've given you a number of examples of how you can blend technology as an insight tool to help you be able to do that people side, your side of that empathy. I think there's just a lot more opportunities. Micah talked about the ROI. I mean, David, how many conversations have we been in our lifetimes of trying to teach those finance folks what the ROI of an HR software is? You ever have that conversation? That happened in the past? And we talk about that. We really haven't had the ability to do that.
No, a handful of years ago, I actually gave a presentation on why CFOs, controllers struggle to get along with our HR people. And Micah claims we accounting people don't have any empathy. Well, I have given out birthday cards, so I think that counts. Anyway, no, but there is a lot of truth to that. I mean, because I'm a hardcore left brain thinker, and a lot of the best HR people I've ever seen, they're actually a nice blend of both. And trying to figure out that ROI, you need that accounting person to help aggregate and pull together those numbers. But in the HCM world, when I first got into this line of work, back in 2008, it was all about the paycheck. It was all about the payroll tax compliance work. It was all about the money movement, all of those pieces. And then timekeeping was there. And well, that was really nice because you could import a data file. Well, and then all of a sudden, timekeeping and payroll got together, and they started hanging out in the same house. So all of a sudden, all that data came together easier. And then HR joined the party, like back in 2010 with the Affordable Care Act. And now here we are today, where the finance accounting world, the HR world is being blended into a more and more seamless system where the walls and barriers across timekeeping, HR, payroll, they're all being blurred. And they're being blurred even outside of that, as we've all seen here in the last 45 minutes. And it's actually pretty darn fascinating the way software has driven that bus. And the impetus was really the Affordable Care Act that made that necessary in order to comply with those rules, to need that data from timekeeping and payroll all in one, and then HR as well.
Right. Well, the other thing I would just add to that is, I think this idea of ROI on HR technology. No one disputes, the spend that you're going to make on your ERP system to manage your inventory or manage your ordering. When you start to look at the hard numbers about, how much do you spend on payroll and benefits and turnover and training, and, shouldn't you have a comparable, willingness to spend to manage those costs, to manage those benefits? It's not, it's not the soft part of HR. It's the hard numbers that people are expensive, and training is expensive, and turnover is expensive, and better tools to manage those numbers are hugely valuable.
Yeah, so just flip through these next four. Again, everyone on the call can read, but we've talked about a lot of these themes. So understanding, recognizing, ensuring continuity of people operations. That's that not having to have a human being there to approve something that could already be approved. So imagine a time off request that literally can think through the logic I would go through as a first line manager or a second line manager in making that decision. Does the employee have the time available? Is there a scheduling conflict? Is there a workload need? Whatever those determinations are, and does a manager need to make that determination, or can a computer literally understand that decision point and flag the ones that maybe need a secondary review? So if I get 1,000 time off requests a year as a manager, do I maybe only have to review 20 of those because the software is providing that governance and doing it? How do you build those skills? How do you communicate better? The number one thing I would tell HR folks, you all know this, but when employees find out about stuff on social media or other channels before you tell them, that's just a non-starter. It's not acceptable, and it does a bad job of promoting a good culture. And whether you're attracting, retaining, I'm a big believer you got to work on all of those different buckets. There's just a lot of things. So that's what's driving the development, is what I'm trying to position. So hopefully you've learned a few things there. And as we close out here, I want to tell a quick story as Micah gets to this next slide. And what I want you to think about is these major themes. We've spent our time today talking about how this affects HR, but when David said things are blending over, organizations right now, Bergen KDV is helping modernize their accounting software and their ERP software. We're doing that. We're helping organizations navigate multi-state sales tax, and that's a whole nother conversation that we're going to need to have based on the legislation that's going on right now. And what that might mean for those of you that have employees in multiple states. And David talked about money movement in multiple states and what that might mean for insurance and bonding and other types of things. But there's a lot happening there, whether it's just organizations, technology in their computers. There's just a number of things that kind of go into that digital transformation. And Bergen is really helping companies modernize the whole back office of what they have to offer, including retirement plan advisory and teaching employees how to value their plan and making sure they're educated and not thinking about some of those finance things as it relates to work. But in this last section here, I want to close with this. So Micah, if you can roll forward to our little video here, I'll kind of tee this up and tell this story. So I want you to pretend that we're all in a conference room. So some of us are back in conference rooms. I'm traveling today, thus my not so great lighting. So we're back traveling and meeting with people, but I want you to pretend you're in a conference room and someone says, there's maybe 8 of us around the table, David and Micah, wouldn't it be nice if we knew this? And it's always funny to me when I sit around that table because it's like a nanosecond and everyone's heads point to the person that's going to draw the short straw of having to figure out that answer, and their face gets red, or they act like they were just asked to do the hardest thing in the world. They groan, they moan, they might do, who knows what's going to happen. But basically, after that person is talked off the ledge, they're going to go to his or her desk. They're going to pull up an application. They probably have to go to like 5 applications to actually answer that, but we're just going to talk about one because this is complicated enough and it'll illustrate the point. They're going to pull up a report writer. They maybe have the 10,000 page binder that Micah went to school for a week or whatever he said to learn that thing. They're going to click a bunch of buttons. They're going to pull a bunch of columns in. They're going to rearrange some, filter some out. Then they're still going to have to kick it out to Excel. And they may get an answer at some point, but I can tell you there are a lot of those questions that I heard asked in 2016, 2017, 2015 that were never answered. They're just too hard to answer. And there's big ROI, going back to that ROI word on it, but it was just very, very hard. You couldn't forklift it and do it. And what I want you to picture here as Micah plays this little recording is I want you to picture going into the application and actually asking it via your voice, using your microphone like I'm doing, or typing it in as if you were doing a Google search, and that being the way that not only your HR data is presented, or your payroll or your time data, let's call it that human capital data, but you can also see, remember when I talked about bringing in things like revenue and bringing in things like workload requirements and bringing things in like number of calls and census data, actually allowing you to model and ask the system to actually give you what you're asking for, with even having to use some of those guided functions. So it's a very exciting time. A lot of things are changing. Some of the questions that have came in here as we've been talking, and I realize we're up against our time, are around how do I get some of those dashboards set up, David and Micah? How do I get the guided paths set up? How do I use those things? So Micah and my contact information, I think here is on the last slide. Those of you that are pay stubs folks certainly have that. Reach out to us and we'd be happy to start a conversation with you. Some of the stuff is just merely educating and training you on it. Others, again, when we look at the payroll module, the HR module, and the timekeeping module is kind of those three. A lot of you are using just payroll. It is a very opportunistic time to stack on timekeeping. It just makes things simpler. It provides value to your employees. You get rid of some spreadsheets. Others of you are already doing those two things, as David said, and you've seen the value in that. Now it's probably time to look at things like maybe doing some paperless onboarding of new hires, building out that HR repository, getting rid of the file cabinet, giving some more advanced self-service capabilities that are going to allow you to give things to your employees and managers, but also do your job on the back end better. Our job here was to expose you to what's happening. David, you did an incredible job. Mikey, you did an incredible job. Thank you for sharing those examples. And I thank all of you for dialing in, and those of you that are listening remotely, we appreciate your business, and we look forward to being part of your HR technology journey in whatever way, shape, or form you see fit. So have a great rest of March, and those of you in the north part of the country, think spring, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you all.